Good evening, everybody. My name is MILEY, coming to you live from Conscious Consumer Network headquarters here in the Netherlands. We're hoping that you're fab and flourishing wherever you may be on this fabulous Wednesday evening. It is, of course, 7 p.m. GMT. That makes it 8 p.m. local time here in Central Europe. So again, welcome to everybody from wherever you may be in the world tuning in here tonight. We are doing another wonderful episode of Dragonology. And of course, we're heading smack bang hard into season 3. This, of course, being episode 3 of season 3. Now, just a reminder to those of you who have perhaps not seen seasons 1 and 2, it could be a very good idea for you to perhaps spend a bit of time doing the research, going through the lectures. There's 13 episodes in each season. Because some of the stuff might seem a little strange to you if you don't know the basis and you don't know the basics. But what we try to do with each episode is recap on what we've learned before, plus take it just that one step further. So here we go in episode 3. We explore how dragon and angel symbolism, all root words, turn up in themes pertaining to acts of ritual and sacrifice. By a study of etymology, it can be proven that many that many acts of sacrifice or violence resulting in the death of another person are indeed ritual sacrifices to gods, deities, angels, but more specifically, dragons. We pick up where we left off last week, and of course, we go just a little bit deeper as we decipher the deception of the dragon. But first, we're going to do some Dragonology basics tonight, and this might be a little bit difficult for some of you to wrap your head around. Again, bear in mind that there are some very specific key indicators which aren't too difficult to work out, because a lot of these things, a lot of what I'm telling you is actually very much present in the way in which we treat our language today. Most of what I will point out to you, most people will kind of gather and understand, because we've been taught these rules in grammar and not really taught to understand why. But anyway, the key to decoding dragon symbology in language is quite simple. Certain letters are interchangeable with each other. So when you have certain root words, you need to know that certain letters within those words are in fact interchangeable with other letters and can potentially create other words which might seem completely different but actually have the exact same origin, exact same root meaning. Okay, so certain letters are interchangeable with each other. Now, which ones are they? First off, all vowel sounds are interchangeable with each other or transliterate with each other, so they swap in and out. So there's A, E, I, O, U, and Y, of course. Only certain combinations of consonants are interchangeable. So unlike the vowel sounds, which all of them are interchangeable within the English language, only certain consonants and certain combinations of consonants are interchangeable, and I'll go through a little template, I should say. A little template of how that works, so you can pick up on a few of the swappy roundies and perhaps help give you a few more clues on how to do this deciphering for yourself. All right, and of course, clues to how sounds are interchangeable is evident in different languages, and we'll show you that as well, because most people will recognize these clues when they start looking at things, particularly if you've traveled to different countries and you start to learn little bits of language here and there. You see which language letters are the same as in your language and which ones are different, which ones sound similar to which other letters. There are definite differences, especially within the Indo-European languages that we come across. So some of the Dragonology basics are, as I've already said, A, E, I, O, U. They are all interchangeable with each other. And I'll use one of the most common examples that I always draw upon. Offy is a very common dragon root word, just like the root word orf, which would have the O-R-P-H, or the root word O-R, just or. Okay, so here we go. The dragon root word Offy can be spelled O-P-H-I, and you can transliterate that I out with an E, okay? And you can even transliterate that E out with a Y, so like philosophy, okay, would have the end suffix of Offy with a Y on it, okay? This particular one would be Ophiuchus. Those of you know Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, okay? And this perhaps would be The tragic bipolar heroine in Shakespeare's Hamlet, known as Ophelia, would perhaps start with the O-P-E, okay? So, as we said, that all the consonants in Dragonology generally can transliterate with each other. And here are good examples of how the I, the E, and the Y transliterates within the same root word. Looking at the PH sound, most people are probably very familiar that that is the, or it's phonetically similar to the F sound. So the word you would potentially use for the word fish or face or feel. Now the PH sound is actually written in Greek as the letter phi, which is actually a straight down vowel with a little circle around the top. That's the letter phi. And the letter phi in English language is represented as PH. Now the PH obviously can also transliterate into just the P. So you could actually just use the P without the H. And then it doesn't have an F sound like a F. Then it has the popping sound. So the minute you take the H away from the P, it no longer has the phonetic sound of the letter F. Rather, the phonetic quality is true to the origin of the P sound. And here we go. Here's a good example of some of this. Using the root word offi, okay, we put it into office. Office, of course, is another god within the Greek pantheon. And, of course, an office, you know, like you go to the office and do some work, photocopying, computer screen, talk to a boss or whatever. It's spelled, I beg your pardon, it's said in exactly the same phonetic way. However, what is different is the spelling, and they both have completely different meanings. However, there is some very deep underlying, interlinking themology going on there, for sure, you better believe it, to do with slavery and contract, of course, and the office. Most of you, I'm sure, can work that one out. Just wanted to stick to the point that I was making here. The PH, for example, in the word prophet would then transliterate into the F for the word prophet, as in, you know, loss and prophet, where this is like a prophet messiah. And we've dealt with the interconnection and the behind-the-scenes meaning of prophet and prophet in previous Dragonologies, the last two that we've done, so please do go check that out. Now, the V and the F in the English language are also interchangeable. And if you speak any Proto-Germanic or Dutch languages, like I was raised speaking Afrikaans, which is a variation of Dutch, Dutch is not that dissimilar to German. And what you find in the Dutch language, as well as in the German language, is that your V sound is phonetically said like an F. So, for example, the word free in Dutch would be vrij, but with a V, all right, instead of an F. And that's very common. A good example of this as well is the letter W then sounds like the V in Dutch. And this comes up in words such as Volkswagen. You get an idea of, you know, the Volks, the V is said with an F sound, and then Wagen, the W is said with a V phonetic sound. So you get an idea of how that all works. And then the V and the F, of course, are interchangeable with each other because of the phonetic relationship between them. And of course, as I've just illustrated, why the W and V are interchangeable with each other, more specifically, you, as I said, notice that word in that change in things such as Volkswagen. If you ever hear an American say Volkswagen, when I say Volkswagen, I'm talking about the German car that makes golf and such like. But if you hear an American say Volkswagen, they're saying Volkswagen. Volkswagen, not Volkswagen. And there is the best way to understand just how the V and the W transliterate out the moment you take it into a Proto-Germanic language. Okay, the S and the C, very obvious, because the S and the C are sometimes said in the same phonetic quality of S. The C also sometimes can be phonetically said as a K sound, but most commonly it's often used as the same sound as an S, so sometimes these are interchangeable as well, the S and the C. Now, last week we were speaking about the G, the J, the G, and the D. And we're going to go on and do a little bit more of this week because this little root is very important to understand. We explained the connection between them, and I'll go on and do that again, but I just want to say the G and the H are very closely connected as well, and sometimes interchangeable with each other. And you can sometimes notice this even in African languages, that the G and the H are often interchangeable. So myself, growing up in South Africa and having learned Zulu and Xhosa as a kid, I obviously know where these letters are interchangeable with each other. But what's interesting to notice is that the letter G and H often turn up next to each other. For example, in words such as left and right, R-I-G-H-T. Another one is ghost, and we spoke about this last week as well. And of course, you get the word host from ghost. But ghost, again, it's not just G-O-S-T, it's G-H-S-O-T. So there's a significance to the G and the H being together, and you find the G and the H turning up in many words, often as a silent phonetic sound. For example, the word thought has a GH in it, yet you don't hear any phonetic representation when I verbalize them of the G and the H. In fact, they are what is called a silent letter or a silent letter coupling. All right, going to go on to the J, the G, and the D a bit more. All three of these are interchangeable with each other, of course, and that is more obvious, as I shall explain for those who haven't paid attention to last week's Dragonology. The letter D and the letter J and the letter D actually form the sound J. And if you look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, you'll find that the resting cobra is the phonetic representation of the letter DJ, J. But when you fuse these two letters together, the J and the D, you get the letter G, which is also said with the same quality of J. Okay, J or G. That's sometimes the other way in which the letter G is said. Now, the letter G turns up in some very interesting places. We did go over this last week, so I won't spend too much time here, but it turns up very significantly in the Freemasons logo. And, you know, of course, interestingly enough, always with an all-seeing eye somewhere, either near it, above it, or below it. But very significant that, because the letter G is a very significant letter. And we'll go on to talk about that a bit more. As I said, the D and the J are the phonetic sound, J, which is represented in Egyptian hieroglyphics as the cobra at rest, which would be this little guy here. Now, doesn't that, I beg your pardon, doesn't that look like a J to you? With the, you know how you do the J with a stripe across the top, the capital letter? Does that not look like a J to you? And then this part over here looks like a bit of a D to you. It does to me, like the tummy of the D that goes around the other way. This could be the tummy of the D going around this way with the long bit that goes up here, you know, the lowercase d. So you can see how this symbol of the resting cobra has evolved into both the D and the J shape. This is actually what these represent, is various parts of this kind of fused together. Okay, so where you'd find DJ in the letters, in the words such as jinn, we've gone into the jinn, the Arabic classification for angel or dragon, or the D-J-I-N-N. Of course, the DJ just transliterates plainly into the J, as in the jinn, which is the most common spelling you find of the jinn in the Arabic scripts. And then jinn, which is, you know, origin, for example, or the alcohol gin with a G, as you've spoken about, the D and the J transliterate into the G. And then gen, as in genetics or generation or genesis. Gon, as in dragon, or here now, gone tomorrow, G-O-N. And of course, we talk about the jet column. I spoke about that last week. Won't cover it off this week. But so we're clear on how the DJ is formed. Because why the letter D is so important, I beg your pardon, the letter G is so important is because it is the letter which is used for the word God. Or at least I should say, the reason I use the letter G for the word God isn't by accident. It's very significant. In fact, they've even got the D in there as well. And now the O, as I've spoken about previously, is also representative of the Ouroboros. And that's why it is like a round circle. I do want to talk about the silent letter G as I was earlier, particularly when the letter G comes in next to an H. And I have got the small letter G here, which again, you can see, doesn't that look like a J, this part over here? And doesn't that look like a small letter D? That's the front part of the letter D, which would have a piece that comes up there. So you can see in the small lettering exactly how the D and the J are fused together. But the letter G is also significant. In fact, it's so significant that when it is not phonetically pronounced, it plays a silent function masking the dragon allegory by a symbolic representation. So, you know, sometimes when you're a kid and you were taught to read and write and you were taught to spell phonetically and you go, trying to work out how things are spelled, and suddenly you came across these letters that had no phonetic representation, you know, when you spoke them, you had to write them in the words, but when you spoke them, they weren't represented in the vocal quality of our output. And these little silent letters were very confusing to me, and our teacher taught these things. These are silent letters. They do not get pronounced. However, they are written into the words, otherwise the words are not spelt correctly. You're not creating the correct spells upon yourself. Why do you have to create the correct spells upon yourself? That's very interesting. And the teachers give you bad marks if you don't spell correctly. But why do we have these silent letter G's? It's very symbolic, okay? The letter G is clearly representing something much deeper. It's almost like they wanted to say, this word is very important and we want to hide something in it. So we're going to put a silent letter in there which represents the dragon, and that's how we're going to associate this word or create the word spell that we require for the desired effect. And that's what they've done. So, okay, you've got a few of those Dragonology basics down. I do want to talk a little bit more about some other words which are very important, because again, when you're learning in school, you learn about how to construct sentences grammatically. You learn certain words come before other words, and certain words are spelled certain ways, a certain order in which the sentence must flow. And then there's certain words that you just write and they've got no meaning. They really do have no meaning, but they're there. They join the sentence together. They kind of make the thoughts flow and put them into, I don't know, what we consider a literal or literary format. Here are some of those words. In fact, one of the most common ones I've actually left off here, and I'll go into that in a moment. The, which I will discuss a bit later, T-H-E, all right, we've spoken about T-H-E and what that means. The letter A, we'll go into that a bit more. And of course, we talk about the or a, like the man crossed the road, or a man crossed the road, or an ambulance came speeding down the road. You put an A-N next to a word that starts with a consonant, okay? Or an ambulance and a police car. So an ambulance and a police car came speeding down the road. Of is also very common, and it's a joining word as well. For example, my name is Clarence of the clan MacLeod, or something like that. It is a joining word, not a non-specific meaning. And then, of course, I, when people use the letter I when referring to themselves, but I'm going to get into the I a little bit. And I did leave one out here, my apologies. Let's the syllable or, which is the most common dragon root word. And you often have or and being used interchangeably with each other. You know, would you like an apple or a pear? Would you like an apple and a pear? You can see how those words are kind of interchangeable, but don't really have too much of a meaning. Although they do affect the way the sentence is nuanced, the individual words themselves really do not have, per se, an actual definition. So they're kind of just purposeless words in a way, but not really. These words have spell quality, okay? There's a binding aspect to these. You have to understand this deeper allegory. They're not just put there because they have no meaning. They are there for a very specific reason, and we shall get into that a bit more. Okay. As I said, T-H-E, the man, the moon, the sun, the stars, the house, the dog, It's one of the most commonly used words in our day-to-day language, and most people don't even realize how many times a day they use this word. And most people wouldn't even begin to think or even start to consider that this word, T-H-E, the combination of these three letters, has a much deeper allegorical meaning. Well, quite simply, it means God. T-H-E means God. And theoi, I beg your pardon, there should be an I there, my apologies. Theoi equals gods, right? That is the plural. So the is God and theoi is gods. Now theology, the study of God, the study of the Bible, the study of religion, that's what theology generally is. Or I'm trying to think of a theologist is someone who teaches theology or is into, the study of God. Yeah, that's, I think, the best description of theology. And of course then theosophy. Theosophy is the name of the cult started by, or the belief system or religion I should say, started by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. I've got several of her books, a very wise Russian mystic of the 19th century who really left her behind a great amount of esoteric wisdom. And of course the The turns up in the name of her cult. The The, of course, also turns up in the name of Aleister Crowley's cult, referencing the dragons, or God. When we talk about God, we're talking about the dragons. So when we talk about The, we're talking about the dragons. Again, dragons always referenced in purple or dark red. I'll explain that a bit more. And Aleister Crowley, of course, the starter of Thelema, the Crowley-esque religion, very dark. Then we have therianthropy. Now, the, obviously God, and then anthropy refers to human. So it's the ability to change into a human shape or change into an animal shape. Now you've got a word called theriancephalic, which means that they have the head of a human being or the head of an animal and the body of a human being or the body of an animal. So there's a mixture. But again, it has the word the, and we've got a similar meaning in the word therianthropy, which is talking again about the shape-shifting or supposedly hybrid quality of one creature and the next. It's very common within the dragonology works that we study. We've spoken a lot, of course, about theophany and theophania, which is the appearance and disappearance of God or dragons, which is, of course, why we've got the The in there. Theotokos, Jesus is thought to be a Theotokos, meaning offspring of the gods, son of God, Theotokos. And then hemithoi means half god or demigod or demiurge. So hemi as in hemisphere, like half, and then theoi. This is how this word over here is meant to be spelled. So half of the gods, that would be the plural iteration of God. So you understand exactly where the The goes, and I'm sorry if this is familiar ground to you. It's important just to refresh so you understand where we're going with this dragonology. And of course, as we discussed last week, the rules of English grammar, an A is used prior to a word starting with a consonant, and is used next to a word starting with a vowel. And of course, angel, A-N-G, as we've spoken about already, the A and the and then of course, you know where we get the G from. Angel, of course, comes from the Latin anguiem or angui, both words which represent or mean serpent. And of course, we've spoken about the L as well, L being the Hebrew Elohim or dragons. The Latin iteration of that would be the I-L again. The consonants just swap out. That's what happens here. And the Arabic root, it would swap out to the A-L. So consonants, a good example of how the consonants, I beg your pardon, not the consonants, the vowel sounds all swap around over here. E, I, and A. Now, important again, we recognize that the G, J, and D always are interchangeable. These are the consonant sounds that interchange quite a lot. And I want to point some of this out because we touched on a bit of this last week, but there is further insinuations rooted here, and I really want to get into them because once you've sort of gotten to one level, you're going to dig a bit more and go, oh, hang on, this goes a whole bunch deeper. Okay, we've spoken about the interconnection between angels and English and England. Other words with the A-N-G root. All right, obviously A-N-G can also be represented as and, which as we've spoken about is often used to join a sentence, this and that. Now, if you have a look at the word England, all right, England actually has both these two dragon roots in them because the E-N-G is actually, England comes from Anglo, all right, as we've worked out, the English language said in French is written as ENGELS, pointing out again the transliterations of the vowel sounds A and the E. Here again, transliterations for vowel sounds A and E for the first syllable here. Okay, but what have we got? Oh, we've got A-N-D, the second part, A-N-D. So in the word England, you have two very distinctive, clear dragon root words, which are actually dragon stroke angel root words. This is clear allusion to the angel root. There is a reason why we have so many stories about fairies and angels in places like Avalon and Camelot and things like that, because there is something about England. And it has to be, particularly when you look at the way in which they've written the word and how very clear it's got a very obvious double dragon root in it. Okay, and of course the dragon symbolism is all over the United Kingdom. So the word England, as I say, has a double serpent root, and anything that has more than one serpent root word in means it's extra significant, that much more. It's double dragon, if you want to call it that. Language of the angels. Okay, the Dutch word for angels is ENGELS. Okay, ENGELS, that is what the Dutch word for angels is. Talk about angels in Dutch, and I know the reason I can say this is because although I speak fluent English, I live in Holland, my husband is Dutch, so I know what angels are in Dutch. Angels in Dutch is ENGELS, again showing how the A and the E vowel sounds transliterate and swap out with each other. But what's interesting is the Dutch word for English is ENGELS. Now the French word for English is anglais, okay? And the Dutch word for English is ENGELS. So this is interesting. The Dutch word for angels is ENGELS. The Dutch word for English is ENGELS. And what this shows you is that these two words are identical, okay? So Dutch angels and the Dutch word for English are both exactly the same words. In Dutch, the word for English and angels are the same word. This indicates just how English is the language of the angels, okay? It's very obvious, and we talk about this as well with Ivrit being the name of the Hebrew language. The word Ivrit actually has a very strong dragon root in it as well. All right, wanting to develop a little bit more of the A and G roots, we went into a couple of them last week, and we are going to expand this theme straight down the middle to the heart of the beast, so to speak. Okay, we spoke about tusks and horns, particularly because we dealt a lot with the elephant god Ganesha, and we spoke a lot about how the various elements of the element god are actually representations of the serpent or the dragon gods. And we got into quite a lot of detail in that in episode 2. So if you missed that, guys, go back and watch. It'll make a lot more sense as to why we go this route if you understand sort of the backdraft of it. But horns and tusks and fangs are all bones. They're all protruding, pointy bones that come out of the body. They're not internal bones. So they're pretty much classified all together. When you think of horns, you know, they are these bony things that come out the top of the head. Fangs, these bony things that come out the mouth. Or tusks, they come up, pacing up maybe like the elephant's ones. But there are pointy, long protrusions, often with a curve or a spiral, sometimes with horns, but coming to a point and very much associated with each other, symbolically, significantly related to each other. As I say, fangs are symbolically linked as symbols and themes relating to the dragon, okay? And again, this is further proven by the fact that we've got the serpentine angel dragon root word of A-N-G in the word fang. Very, very interesting to notice this. The fang is one of the most obvious symbols of the dragon. And it's not by accident, because if you know, look at snakes, for example, some of them don't have any other teeth except a pair of fangs. Often that's where the venom comes out of, it comes out of these fangs. Or it runs down the ridges in the fangs, being released from glands within the gums. But this is why fangs are so symbolically significant, is because the one thing you notice on a serpent is that, if anything, the one set of teeth they do have are the fangs. Now, interesting, In fact, the symbol of the fangs or themes of fangs are also commonly associated with vampires. And I will go into a little bit more on the vampires in a bit, but vampires also, one thing you think of when you think of vampires is, fangs. In fact, if you go out for Halloween and go and buy a vampire costume, the one thing they give you is a set of like plastic dentures with these extended fangs, and you go, oh, all over the show, trick-or-treating. But that is part of the vampire getup, is to try and get yourself a really cool looking pair of fangs that, still enable you to talk and not chop your lip in half with 2 piercings through the bottom. That was always my fear of putting something like this on, is that, I'd end up munching into myself with such sharp teeth coming out. But very commonly, vampire fangs, a vampire does not look like a vampire unless they have enlarged, sharp, pointy fangs, longer and sharper than the average human. So again, fangs, very important, very massive symbol of the dragon. Of course, the vampire, again, is an allegory of the dragon, and I shall get into that as well. We spoke about the Hindu and Vedic gods again last week. We met Avran, the Hindu god, and we spoke about his super large ears and why they're significant. But what is also significant about Avran is he's got these as well, these fangs that come out. But they don't really they look like a mixture between fangs and tusks, kind of because they curl upwards instead of down like fangs would. So this is interesting that we, referenced this god last week because of the ears, and that he also has, guess what, fangs. The fangs are common on many of the gods. Hindu god Kali, beg your pardon, goddess Kali also has the fangs and the protruding tongue, which I will get into as well, because we have dealt with the ears, we've dealt with the long nose, we're going to deal with all the various facial aspects and how they are representative of the dragon. But Kali is one of the goddesses with the fangs and the tongue, both symbolically significant of the dragon. So let's get into the fangs and the tongue story, shall we? See where else the fangs and the tongues turn up. And of course, on the Gorgons, the Gorgon has 2 very significant dragon root words in it. The O-R, the most common dragon root word being or, and gon, as we've already discussed, from the root word jinn. So the Gorgon, Medusa, for example, was a Gorgon, the woman who supposedly had serpents for hair and was slain and had her head taken off. And Gorgons, for example, this one you can see little snakes in spirals around this Gorgonian, which is just a facial depiction of a Gorgon, clearly with fangs, top and bottom depicted, and a sticking out tongue. And this is on a piece of crater pottery, ancient Greek pottery from theoi.com. You can see these guys spell their website right, not like me. Theoi.com, you can check out all these images of Greek gods, plural, which is what theoi is. Here depicted with wings like an angel or a fairy, because they're all the same thing. And of course for the tongue and the fangs, very clearly depicted. This is a full body depiction of a Gorgon. This is just a facial depiction of a Gorgon. This depiction is often found on the aegis, and you'll find lots of marble carvings of people like Julius Caesar, who has a Gorgon on his aegis, which is a cloak with a Gorgon face on it. The goddess Athena also wore an aegis with a Gorgonian face on it, supposedly to mask who they really are, but be a symbolic representative of the fact that that's who they really are. They are in fact Gorgons, dragons, serpentine, angelic beings. And the tongue and the fangs are significantly symbolic, and we'll get into that a bit more now. Let's look at the word tongue, okay? As we said, the vowel sounds transliterate out with each other. So if you take the A away, you can put the O in, and that works very, very well in the word tongue, right? Everyone knows what tongue is. Now, the sticking out of the tongue, this whole sticking, you're pointing your tongue. I'm not very good at, tongue protrusion acts, but the sticking out of the tongue is something that's typically a reptilian trait. And anyone who has spent a lot of time around reptilian type animals, be it lizards or snakes, and I grew up in Africa, so I got to see a lot of this as a kid. One of the things you notice is the tongue that flickers in and out, puts in and out, that comes in and out. That tongue coming in and out is very significant. And as you see here, we start to go into the gods that have their tongue out. Again, this is a serpent or reptilian representation, okay? It is really reptilian animals or serpentine type animals that stick their tongue out, okay? And this is another creature called a MILEY, CYRUS. I'm sure you guys have seen her, especially in ritualistic music awards where she likes to do the whole dragon tongue thing out at everybody. Really, really, really disgusting. But anyway, that's why they do it. But I just wanted to say, when you see them all, sticking their tongues out at these young pop stars who have sold their soul to the devil, this is what it's representing. The tongue is a serpent symbol, all right? That's what it is. Now let's look at language. And I love the word language, because language is one of those words where you do just stick your tongue right out kind of thing. Language. The word language contains the dragon root word ang, which is very interesting, but it also has the angu as an anguish, which comes from the Latin word angui. Angui, of course, referencing the serpent. So language is interesting that it's got the dragon root word ang in it, because the serpents gave us our language. The dragons gave us our written symbolic structure. They gave us our arts. We never thought to pick up pen or chisel to create images prior to dragon intervention with humanity. We were not artists. We were hunter-gatherers. Maybe we drew, little things in the sand, but the whole concept of art and culture is really a draconian construct. Looking at the word slang is one of my favorites, because firstly, in the most obvious term, slang refers to words, concepts, or expressions that are transformed into colloquial terms, expressions, or words shortened. And it's generally, you'll find that people within those kind of cliques or circles talk to each other with specific slang language. I've spoken previously about Cockney rhyming slang, which I won't get into that now, but there are many examples of that. But using certain words, shortening them, changing them to represent something else. Like when I say to someone, BRB, meaning I'll be right back. Or, that's so totes, meaning that's totally awesome. That's when you're talking about slang. Or no probs, man, that's like no problem. I have no idea what Zuby or YOLO means, but anyway, we'll move on from that one. Slang. The word slang is interesting because it also contains the ang, a dragon angel root word, but the lang comes from the word language, right? Here we've got L-A-N-G, language. So slang is the first syllable of language. But the word slang is also very interesting because in the Dutch language, slung, if you say slung, that's a snake. That is a serpent. When you say slung in Dutch or in Afrikaans, you're talking about a snake or a serpent. And when you take the S away and you just have lang or lung, that means in Dutch, lang, in English would be long, as in a long piece of string. Now, long in English is the Chinese word for dragon. In Chinese, you talk about the long, you talk about the dragon. So all these words are very intricately interwoven into the fabric of our reality. Okay, now we've spoken about this as well, how the letter A, of course, is the symbolic representation of the pyramid with the 13 steps and the all-seeing eye at the top. That's what the letter alpha represents. We did this quite extensively last week, so I won't hammer that home. I'm going to show you the next connection. Remember, I've already spoken to you about how consonants are interchangeable with each other. Let's talk about how this letter A transliterates into the I and why. Okay, very simple to see. I don't know if anybody's paying attention to what the similarities are between these two letters just as they stand here. I'm going to point them out if it's not that obvious. First off, if you start taking a line down there and you draw it along the base where those lines are coming out there, you're going to start getting a triangle shape, right? Which is what you've got going on here, okay, is a representation of a triangle shape. And then you've got a separate little dot over there. The dot is significant and most people overlook it. Where else do you find the dot? you find the dot on top of the J. And of course, we've spoken about the D, J, and G and why they are significant. But that dot on top of the I is also significant. What that dot is representing is it's representing what would be going in here. Okay, so this would represent the pyramid, and which would be this part over here of this particular $1 bill representation of the all-seeing eye raised capstone above the pyramid. That would be the dot, and this would be the body of the eye. I don't know if anybody's seen that. So this would be the same as this, and this would be represented as this area here. And I'll show you this more clearly over here. You begin to see this more clearly when you actually put the eye next to the actual pyramid. This raised, no space in between, you see, raised from this. That is what the eye is representative of. And if it's not enough that the letter I is actually alluding to the pyramid with the raised capstone, okay, because that's supposed to be a circle like your eye. There's obviously, look, semicircular eye inside there. They actually call this eye. I mean, work it out. It's called an eye. And you know, like an eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. There it is, an eye for an eye. So that is why this letter is called an I. Because if you couldn't work out that it's also like the letter A representing the pyramid and capstone, well, it tells you because it's called an I. It's not that hard to work out when you just, you know, pay attention. All right then, song. Song is rooted in ritual. And this is nothing new. We've spoken about this as well. Instruments, of course, being said to be created by the devil, which is why they control music, and you've got to set yourself the devil to make it in the music industry, blah, blah, blah. It's all interlinked. But song is ultimately rooted in ritual. The act of putting music to words, dance, performance, all of that rooted in a ritual. In fact, when we started school, speech and drama classes at school, and I did that since like first grade, the first thing they teach you when you did theatre history was theatre was rooted in ritual. That's a fact. Song, dance, and theatre are all rooted in ritual. And when you take the word sing, it actually transliterates into a few interesting dragon root words, because obviously we've got A and G in sang, which is the past tense of sing, and then song, okay, which sing is the verb and song is the noun of the same word. All we're doing here is transliterating out these vowel sounds. So you see why I showed you why the vowel sounds all transliterate, because you see it throughout. They're always changing. And then you still got the ing. And as I said, the G for most of these are silent. There's a reason for that, okay? When the G is silent, it is because it has a function that is unknown to you. It's a symbolic function of the dragon. They're marking the dragon by casting a spell with these words, by using specific letters that have specific meanings. They cast a spell. We don't even know, but we are taught to spell. So if we don't know we're casting a spell, how stupid of us. They're telling us, you got to spell it correctly at school. You know, you got to do a spelling test. Of course it's a spell. They teach you and tell you it's a spell. Anyway, as I was saying, performance arts such as music, song, and dance, and theatre are all rooted in ritual. And I'll get onto that a little bit more as we go into theatre. But first I want to deal with this particular group of root words. The word angel as well, the dragon and angel are the same thing. The word angel with the A and G root. Angel is etymologically cognizant with the following words: anger, danger, stranger, and strangle. Right? This starts to get a little bit interesting. So let's go through some of these. Okay, let's look at strange first of all. Let's have a look at strange. I picked this definition up when I was looking it up. Unusual or surprising in a way that is unsettling or hard to understand. Now, picture the scenario. There you are. There is, say for example, Queen Elizabeth II. Suddenly, she starts to shapeshift into an 8-foot dragon, all right? I think the way you would describe that perhaps is strange, unusual or surprising in a way that is unsettling or hard to understand, particularly if you were not aware of any of the stuff, and there you were standing in the audience and suddenly Queen Elizabeth decides to shapeshift into an 8-foot reptilian dragon with wings. And of course, if you watched last week's Dragonology, you'll be aware that I did in fact publish an article, beg your pardon, we discussed an article that was published by Buckingham Palace, or the royals, or the staff of the royals, at least junior IT staff, as they claim, who says that the Queen has actually admitted to the fact that she's not human. And this, of course, alludes to the fact that she is, in fact, a shape-shifting reptilian dragon who has been eating children and sacrificing human beings, and her bloodline going back for thousands of years, many generations, have been doing the same, whilst, you know, controlling a large proportion of the world's wealth and leaving half the world in poverty. So that's the Queen for you. But like I said, you'd find it very strange if you suddenly witnessed this happening. The fact, you know, shape-shifting, you'd probably feel unsettled, and you probably would not be able to understand it. It would be definitely very hard to understand. So I love this word strange. And I read this definition, I was like, yeah, that sounds like somebody was standing in that audience of 1,000 people watching the Queen shape-shift into a dragon. This is exactly what they would probably be feeling. Man, this is strange, okay? I love this. Got the A and G in there. And of course, you know, you just gotta love Marvel. You gotta love Disney. You gotta love Hollywood mind control entertainment machine, because these buggers, they love to take dragon symbolism, just encode it on so many levels, so obviously thrown in our faces that we should be able to see the stuff, and yet we don't, okay? The most recent rendering of Marvel, of course, being Doctor Strange, and Benedict Cumberbatch plays the lead role of Doctor Strange, which I thought was very interesting, because Benedict Cumberbatch actually played the voice of Smaug the dragon in Lord of the Rings, and I'll get onto Smaug a bit later because he comes up. Benedict Cumberbatch also played the voice of Sauron, of course, the voice of that flamed eye in Lord of the Rings. So interesting, he now turns up in Doctor Strange, and look at the emblem Doctor Strange wears upon his chest. Isn't that an all-seeing eye? You know, just one of them. And he's got these magical powers and all sorts. Again, these heroes with supernatural powers. This theme keeps coming up. You know, we've spoken about this several times in the past to Dragonologies. Why it's interesting is because wherever you find a dragon root word, by God, or a dragon theme that is multi-layered, I swear on my life, you will find some kind of Disney cartoon character or Marvel cartoon character with these features, because all these features are symbolically masking the existence and worship of dragon gods that enslave humanity, that drink our blood, that eat babies, that do the worst possible things to us. And you know what? We just let it happen. So this is what's going on. They're encoding it into children's literature, and they get children hooked on these things. Oh, you know, superheroes, adoration. And what this does inadvertently sends your energy, your worship, your adoration, your energetic currency towards the dragon, okay? Where attention goes, energy flows. Never forget. So that's Doctor Strange. Please do go check it out. I thought it was actually really well done Marvel cartoon. And yeah, lots of interesting allegories in this particular number. And of course, strange alludes to the word stranger. A literal concept of a stranger is similar to that of a foreigner or alien, which are both themes played out in dragon serpentine etymology. You know, we look at people or beings that are not like us, perhaps from another planet, we call them alien. We even look at people from foreign countries and we call them alien, you know, illegal aliens, so to speak. Or foreigners, you know, when tourists come to your country, they're foreigners. And this again alludes to the dragon, because they are foreign to the human race. For the most part, most people are completely unaware of them. And of course, you've got the ANG, dragon, angel, root word in the word stranger. And stranger, okay, you've got ranger in the word stranger. Let's look at the word ranger. And we talked about Lord of the Rings earlier. We talk about it a few more times, because let me tell you what, Mr. Tolkien, he knew stuff, definitely. He very highly initiated, and he encoded a lot of stuff into his works. He was trying to leave behind clues for us. to decipher. So this is a very famous scene from Lord of the Rings. This is when Aragorn gets caught off his guard by the fairy Arwen, and she puts a knife to his throat and says, "What is this? A ranger caught off his guard?" Because this gentleman here, played by Viggo Mortensen in the film, is actually the character of Aragorn, who at the start of the film we get told he's a ranger. Now, we don't know at the end that he's going to be the king. Now, always remember, royalty, gods, rulers, dragons, inextricably linked. So the moment you bring in something like a king, that's royalty, that's linked to the dragons, okay? But they tell you at the beginning, they kind of intimate by calling him a ranger. So the word ranger hides the dragon bloodline in the etymology. Aragorn was crowned king and then married to an elven dragon princess. That's who Arwen was. Never forget, they were very, very specific about making sure that the right bloodlines interbred, particularly royalty. They're obsessed with the bloodlines. And this theme is played out very much in Lord of the Rings. Here again, this is a beautiful scene where Aragorn is crowned king, and this is the Princess Arwen, which it's a beautiful scene. And of course, she's an elven, a mortal. And there's another theme that's played out in Lord of the Rings, and that is the fatal choice between the pairing of a mortal and an elf, or a dragon and a human. Supposedly there comes a fatal consequence, and Arwen chooses to live a mortal life so that she can be the spouse of the king. But what we don't really know is actually the king himself has dragon lineage, and that's encoded into his name. So very, very interesting. Mr. Tolkien certainly knew a few things and wasn't making any mistakes by the words that he used, that's for sure. Human sacrifice and ritual murder. Very hard, because this is what it comes down to. Everything comes down to this. Everything comes down to sacrifice, and it's a very sad fact. Ritual sacrifice is as old as ophiolatry. Ophiolatry is the oldest religion on the planet. It is the worship of the dragon, the worship of the serpent, and it is the religion from which all other religions have evolved. All religions today come from the common root of dragon or serpent worship, known as ophiolatry. Look it up. Dragons feed on humans, and that's a fact. There's much artwork going back many, many, many hundreds of years which have images which prove this. It's been commonly known, there's subcultures, that this kind of stuff goes on. And in mythology or folklore fairy tale, we talk about, you sacrifice a virgin to the dragon, or the dragon comes and eats the virgin. It's always the virgin, okay? And the word virgin is very significant. But so is the word infant, okay? Because I showed you last week as well how significant the word infant is. The word infant actually etymologically encodes sacrifice the dragon into the word, okay? Just as the word virgin. Most people would think the word virgin means that the woman, or the man for that matter, because you can have a man who's a virgin, generally the woman has not had sexual intercourse, and that defines her as a virgin. No. Firstly, the word virgin is code for a young person, or a very young person, can even be an infant, but virgin means that they're generally probably very young, prepubescent, okay? And the word jinn comes from as we spoke already about, the root word jinn, that starts with a D-J-I-N-N, and then goes down to the J-I-N-N. So it's got that dragon root word in there. And then, of course, the word infant is really referencing the same thing as a virgin. That is somebody that's very young that's going to get eaten or sacrificed to a dragon. And that is what is encoded into the word virgin, is you're young and you're dragon food. Just what the word infant means. It means you're young and you're dragon food. That's what it means. So being a virgin and being an infant, these two words are actually not allegorical to something else as we have been taught, okay? What the deeper meaning of them is that you are dragon food, okay? Dragon food. Bottom line, infant means dragon food. Virgin means dragon food. So virgin and infant are rooted in sacrificial ritual to the dragon or serpentine gods. That's what these words mean. Please go back and watch episode 2 to get a better understanding of exactly why we say this about infant. We've covered this off with virgin before as well. All right, the word strangle, strangulation. Yeah, doesn't get more pleasant. Strangulation is a common form of ritual sacrifice. Children are often strangled in ritual offerings to dragons, gods, or angels. And of course, the dragon root word is encoded into strangle because strangling is a very common practice in terms of causing death in a ritual sacrifice. Often it's done by strangulation. Ritual strangulation has been depicted in so many artworks. I actually couldn't stomach it. I only put one in here. But acts of human sacrifice by ritual strangulation has been depicted in so many artworks of the past. And it symbolically marks a ritual tradition of human sacrifice. And here's some evidence of this, actually. Of course, for something that is as prevalent, of course you're going to find evidence of this. The remains of a victim of human sacrifice by ritual strangulation. Here we go. The Tolland man is a naturally mummified corpse of a man who lived during the 4th century BC, so a long time ago, more than 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. During a period characterized in Scandinavia as the pre-Roman Iron Age. He was found in the 1950s buried in a peat bog, which preserved his body. In fact, the body was so well preserved back in the 1950s because of, they didn't have the advanced kind of stuff we do now in terms of carbon dating technologies and stuff. They actually thought this was a recent body. They didn't realize it was 2,500 years old because it was so well preserved. In fact, there have been several bodies which have been found in bogs. They're called bog bodies. Lots of them in the UK and lots of them around Europe. And all very well preserved, and many of them, again, ritually sacrificed. Ritual murder is the cause. Bog bodies are generally ritual murder because, think about it, they get murdered and then they get carried to this bog and dumped in there by the people who murdered them. Now let's get rid of the body, dump them in the bog. And there's lots of these bog bodies that come out of these peat bogs, very well preserved because of the oils in the peats, which have made sure that this body stayed intact. But you can see over here, very clear around his neck, is a rope, okay? So this is a ritual strangulation because strangulation was a very common form of human sacrifice. So no doubt we find lots of evidence of people being strangled in rituals turning up in remains of people who have been involved in sacrifice. And it doesn't get any easier to talk about, of course. The A-N-G turning up in the word hang, and that's not by accident either. Human sacrifice has commonly been achieved by hanging. I can't talk about that too much more because it just depresses me. Tarot cards. The Hanged Man, of course, being a very, a tarot card, a well-known tarot card in the tarot deck. And of course, hanged has the A-N-G in it. Why do they have the Hanged Man in there? Interesting. And of course, the word mangle, when we're talking about human sacrifice. Let's look at the definition of mangle, and I do apologize for this hideous picture. Again, this is the only way when I Googled mangle, this is one of the pictures I found, a mangled body. Definition of mangle. Now, doesn't this sound like sacrificial ritual? To mutilate or disfigure by battering, hacking, cutting, or tearing. Ritual elements there. That's what they do. They mutilate and disfigure and cause pain and suffering because the more adrenochrome in the body, the more adrenaline in the blood, the better it is for those who drink the blood because that's what they want. They want the adrenochrome. So yeah, mangled, also with an A-N-G and not by accident because mangling bodies is a very common practice in ritual sacrifice. Just go and Google some of the imagery to do with satanic ritual abuse and sacrifice, and you'll find lots of hacked up bodies of babies. We're going to deal with the STR root because I can't ignore this one which kept coming back in. I was like, all right, let's have a look at where this little root turns up because it turns up in some very interesting places to do with this A-N-G etymology. Okay, so we've got strange, stranger, strangle, strong, and string. Okay, a long piece of string reminds me like of a snake or a serpent, or you need string to strangle with, but also string as in a string instrument, which of course we've spoken about music and why it's linked to the dragon. So we talk about string instruments. The STR assonance root is found in string and instrument. Interesting that, because as we said, music and instruments are associated with gods, dragons, and angels. For example, Orpheus is the god of music. Music is the art of the muses. The muses were the daughters of the gods, and there were 9 muses of Athens. We've covered this off in previous Dragonologies. But what you find is some very key common dragon root words in words like organ, okay, with the OR, one of the most common dragon root words. And of course, these secondary dragon root words like ANJ, which of course is change roundable or transliteratable with the D and the G, which gives you the A and G root. And of course, the shortened of the A and G, the piano, organ, banjo, piano, as an example of some of the words that have the dragon root. And I'm sure if you go through them, you would find lots more. And then, of course, the STR turns up in a very significant word, the word strigoi, which is actually an Eastern European word. It originates from Eastern Europe. In Romanian mythology, the strigoi are troubled spirits of the dead rising from the grave. They don't always have to be spirits, but the word spirit, we've also explained, is another symbolic representation of the dragon. So some strigoi can be living people with magical properties, superpowers, like as in heroes, you know, extra human abilities. Dragons can fly, dragons can change shape, they can appear and disappear, superhuman abilities. Again, all these themes associated with the dragon. So they have magical properties such as the ability to transform into animals, shape-shifting, therianthropy. Okay, all themes associated with the dragon. Invisibility, theophania, the ability to appear and to disappear, to be invisible. Theophany, theophania, we've spoken about that. So the strigoi can change shape, they can become invisible, and they have a propensity to drain blood. And of course, this is something that's commonly associated with vampires, is the drinking of blood. And again, let's have a look over here, the strigoi with a lovely pair of protruding fangs to mark the dragon symbol. Okay, so strigoi is just another word for vampire. That's what they effectively were. Although not known as vampires per se, all the characteristics of the strigoi of Eastern Europe were very much that of the vampire. Now, vampires are some of the most commonly alluded to, referenced, and overwritten, overplayed genres of film and literature that there are. It's just, I'm never amazed at the endless amount of dragon-themed and vampire-themed material that comes out. In fact, the word Dracula comes from the word dragon. But it just seems to be an obsession of Hollywood. Vampire, everything's vampire. And they just don't seem to ever get bored or lose ideas on how to, once again, recycle the vampire story, or, you know, pick it up out the trash, dust it off, polish it up, recycle it, and, you know, kind of try and push it for more than it's worth again. But this is programming. All of this is programming. Let's quickly look at the word vampire for a minute before I start getting onto my high horse about vampires in Hollywood. The word vampire contains the very common dragon root word pyre. That is a dragon root word. And for example, pyre is actually etymologically cognizant with pyro referencing fire, like as in pyroplastic or pyromaniac, people, you know, fire. And one of the things that the dragon is associated with, the creational elements, earth, wind, fire, water. Okay, those are the 4 elements that dragons are associated with, and of course the 5th element, spirit. So interesting that the pyre has a double meaning, both a reference to the elemental creational element of fire, and a very definite link to the common dragon root word, pia, pure, pair, which goes into fear, parla, para, words like Paris, paradise, palace, all these words are rooted in dragon allegory. And again, vampires, very many different interpretations of them, but said predominantly, particularly the character of Dracula, to be based upon Vlad the Impaler or Vlad III, who was a Romanian count who was particularly cruel and liked to drink human blood. Mr. Christopher Lee as Dracula. And then, of course, as I said, there is just no end to the endless list of vampire genre films and books and novels and this and that. People just seem to be obsessed, or at least Hollywood seem to be ever so determined to push the vampire thing in our faces again and again and again. Push darkness and evil in as many forms as they can recycle out at us. Now, I started last week with this theme of masking, multifaceted aspect, the multi-faced thing, and I wanted to pick up on this theme and use this to kind of bring this particular episode of Dragonology to a close. So let's talk about why masks are significant, because it's not just about, of course, the multi-faced aspect. Masks or masking, as we said, are symbolisms which are, or should I say, symbolism is a mechanism of subterfuge, right? All symbolism is a mechanism of subterfuge, which is ultimately there to mask the existence of the dragons, the angels, the demons, the gods, whatever you want to call them. So when you're talking about masking as in its verb form, okay, to mask something, so the verb, the doing word, mask, right? That is what symbolism is. And everything in Dragonology is about symbolism. Symbolism is a mechanism of subterfuge to mask the existence of the dragons or the angels, okay? So that is why masking, or the mask, is so symbolically significant. And there's so many ways in which we can go around and out on this one. So just have a look. Of course, cartoons, Disney, superheroes, always superheroes. And what are superheroes normally? They're normally masked. And it's no coincidence either. This is a much deeper allegory to the fact that they mask the true existence, which, to be honest with you, they're kind of saying that, yeah, you know, these people aren't quite who they seem to be. Why? What else could they be? Perhaps an allusion to a dragon? But this is why all superheroes are masked, okay, or the majority of them are masked. Think about it. Why do we keep having to have masked superheroes? It's because the mask plays a significant function in alluding to the dragon. That's why so many superheroes are masked. That's why you keep coming up with this mask allegory. Now, the masked allegory goes even deeper here when we start looking at things like Eyes Wide Shut, one of my favorite films. And of course, anyone who's seen this film, remember the scene with all these people standing around in this ritual in this amazing mansion, all wearing these masks and robes. And Tom Cruise was asked to remove his mask. Quite a hairy moment in the movie. But the masked ball is a very important theme to bring in at this point. Okay, so this is just to point out the scene from Eyes Wide Shut. Please go see it. Stanley Kubrick's final masterpiece before he was murdered for making this film. And then, of course, the Clarion Masked Ball of 2016, just to give you an idea of an average masked ball. I've been to one myself. They're quite a lot of fun. It's the same as a fancy dress party, just a little bit posher. And interesting, because the word ball, we'll go on to deal with that now. Why call it a masked ball? In both those words, very significant. Ball. A masked ball is usually a ritual, okay? And what the word ball is alluding to is it's etymologically cognizant with the words Baal. Okay, the god Baal, to whom babies were sacrificed. There's various ways you can spell Baal. Baal with a B-A-A-L, B-A-E-L, B-E-L-L. So you just transliterate the A and the E out. And then, of course, Beelzebub is another name for Baal, Beelzebub. And, of course, Baal's often represented as the bull. So, interesting, we've got this cover art. I found very rare cover art for Stanley Kubrick's film. I want to point out some things here because this is hugely significant. Lots going on in this picture. Maybe people look at this just, oh, you know, it's a little bit arty, but no, there is much more going on. First, notice how the face is masked by the words. Yeah? Not an accent. They put the wording over the face to mask the face. Then we've got the horns of the bull. Yeah? The bull. And then what are these coming out the sides? You've got this naked body of the woman. We know that we saw that in the film, all the naked women, the pretty woman with the mask. Well, these look like some kind of insect legs coming out the side. Insect legs. Okay, well, I thought this was rather peculiar because I myself hadn't really recognized Baal in his insect expression until I started doing a bit of research. Google Baal and look what we find. Okay, look at the little insect legs on, this is a depiction of Baal. Okay, again, multi-faced aspect, like masking, multi-headed. We dealt with masking and the multi-headedness of the dragon, so we've got multi-faced aspect with some insect legs coming out here. Okay, so this is not a ball, this is Baal. Baal and ball. Okay, in fact, if you say the word ball in Dutch or Afrikaans, it actually sounds like Baal. You say, ek skop die Baal. So the word ball, be it a round ball which you kick or, a dancing ball where you go with a mask on to have a good time and drink some champagne and perform a sacrificial ritual, they are the same, literally alluding to the same allegory. And of course, there's no mistake as to why Baal is etymologically cognizant with the god Baal, who's often depicted as a bull god. And here's Baal in his bull aspect. And you can see in this particular picture people handing over their children to Baal to be ritually sacrificed. Now the masking aspect comes up in a few interesting places. Last week I went into a huge amount of explanation with regards to the word phantom and all the allegories around that, containing a very key root word being phant or fan, coming from the god FANGS. Now what's interesting is that when you think of phantom, automatically most people go, oh, Phantom of the Opera. It just, it's the cliche that seems to work with phantom. The word opera is also very interesting because it has two very interestingly independent yet linked dragon root words. And that is the opi, as an offie, okay? The P is transliteratable with the PH, so offie, and per, right? Remember we were talking about, just squeeze back here if I can to go back to those root words. Here we go. We've got per in this dragon root word. Pi, because you just swap the letters around, yeah? As long as it's got the P and the R, okay, per, par, these are transliteratable. Okay, back to where I was. Right, so that's why Phantom of the Opera. And of all the things to use for something like Phantom of the Opera, why a mask as the symbol? I know that people don't even question that. It is a given. This beautiful white mask has over the years become the symbol of the Phantom of the Opera, the logo, so to speak. But why? Okay, there's a much deeper allegory to it. And if you start to kind of look into this, it's very interesting. Encoded into this is a much deeper dragon allegory. Okay, theatre origins. Theatre originates with ritual. All right, as I said, they teach you this in mainstream education. This isn't even a dragonology discovery. I learned this at school. Every year when we do speech and drama, we start the year with theatre history. And what's the first thing you learn in theatre history? You learn Greek theatre, and you learn that Greek theatre was rooted in religion, not entertainment. Greek theatre grew out of religious rituals honoring the god Dionysus, who of course was the god of fertility and wine. They had what we call the city Dionysia, which are religious festivals which contained plays and theatres, and they built these amazing staging areas, which are really just ritual areas, okay? This is nothing more than an outdoor church, so to speak, in some respect, an outdoor temple, because rituals were performed. And the allusion to this is the very central point over here is called an altar, which of course is where the sacrifices were performed. Now masking also takes another form. It's not a case of actually placing maybe a plastic or paper mache thing onto your face. Masking has actually evolved in some very interesting ways, and one of the ways is the application of makeup. And this can be like the everyday ritual of putting on lipstick and mascara, as perhaps I might do. but also much more dramatic and extensive makeup, sometimes covering the whole body, particularly for rituals pertaining to war dances, etc. You know, I grew up in Africa. The natives there like to put lots of war paints on, as they call it, or makeup, which is traditional to their culture. So the use of masks and makeup is rooted in ritual traditions, and it has three very specific purposes. First off, creating an illusion, creating another character or persona, the multi-faced aspect, as we've already spoken about, and of course, perhaps to disguise, to mask, again, the existence of the dragon. So let's talk about masking, costume, and dress-up. Another form of masking, of course, is not just putting makeup on your face, but, you know, putting something onto your body to make you look like something totally different, or create an illusion or a disguise of some sort. And I really like this. This is the Thiyam, which, interesting, the TH is in this. It's a ritual in India, which is all about possession and exorcism, very heavy symbolic spiritual ritual. But what's interesting to notice here, because we spoke about the multi-headed aspect last week, check over here, we've got the seven-headed naga, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The seven-headed naga on the crown of the sky with lots of symbols of the moon. Interesting. Okay, so getting dressed up or putting on a costume is part of ritual traditions of many cultures. Okay, here again, seven-headed naga, we've seen them in different forms, coming out from behind the Buddha here. This is one expression of it, and here's another expression of what we have here, which is the seven-head coming out from the seven-headed naga coming out from behind the head over here, seven-headed naga coming out from behind the head over here. Okay, multi-headed aspect theme there again. These themes just tie into each other so inextricably. Okay. Masking and adornment. Right. Adornment, ornament, and decorate. Pretty much these words are synonymous with each other. To adorn something is to put ornaments on it or to decorate it. And they all contain the very significant dragon root word or, and not by accident. Okay. Here's a henna adornment or decoration, or ornamentation of the skin with henna tattooing, which I think looks absolutely spectacularly beautiful. But notice in this particular one, they've also gone and created little elephants in there, which are very, of course, significant. The god Ganesha, very significant in Hindu religion. And we do dress-ups and adornment, and it's part of the ritual traditions of Western peoples, people of my culture. For example, Halloween. Kids dress up and go trick-or-treating. We covered all this off in Dragonology Season 2, all about Halloween and the process of dressing up. Again, ritual adornment. And we ritually adorn a Christmas tree in the same way. We decorate the Christmas tree with ornaments. Okay, we ornament the Christmas tree, which again, ritual adornment. Again, all part of rituals performed in honor of the dragon. And masking. This is the final allegory of masking I do want to deal with, which is the masking of the sacrifice, the hidden votive, okay, the concealed offering. The giving of presents or gifts for religious holidays or birthdays is a representation of a sacrifice. Think about this, okay? If you're going to party, you've got to go out and spend some of your money to buy a gift for somebody else, you know, that they may or may not like, they may use or may just tuck away or re-gift or whatever. But nonetheless, it's a sacrifice on your part. It's costing you something. You have to spend something. Or even if you make it, it's your energetic currency going into it, and you're then giving it away. There's no exchange back to you for it expected. That is a sacrifice, okay? That is the true definition of sacrifice, where something is given without the expectation of something back. Apart from, I will say there's an exception, that people believe the act of sacrifice guarantees them goodwill with whatever god they're sacrificing to. So in some respect, they are expecting goodwill back, but never really comes. The ritual of wrapping, okay, concealing gifts, is symbolic of the hidden or concealed votive offering. Now, a votive offering, I'll go into that. That is what a gift is. It's a sacrifice, okay? It's a votive offering. A votive offering is one or more objects displayed or deposited without the intention of recovery or use in a sacred place for broadly religious or ritual purposes. So a gift is an object that you intend not to recover. Okay, that's why it is a sacrifice. That's why it's a votive offering. A gift or a present is a votive offering. I've got this particular one here, which I love. People have bought, just looks like thousands of crosses to this particular point where they've created a votive offering monument with crosses, items which are not planned to be reclaimed. And often you'll find votive offerings are given in the form of flowers. Now, flowers themselves are a symbol of sacrifice because you cut them like you do. You cut the hair, you ritualistically cut the hair, they cut flowers, so they're going to die. That represents a sacrifice. And also you give them as gifts. So again, it also represents a sacrifice there too. But often you'll find that, for example, at someone's grave, people will leave flowers, never to be recovered. The flowers are a votive offering, okay? So that's the votive offering covered off. And of course, offer, the whole concept of giving an offering, the word offer is a homonym for the Hebrew word offer, which contains the dragon root word ophi in it. And of course, offer is a Hebrew word for gold. Yeah, that's what offer means. It's a Hebrew word for gold. So the actual word for offering comes from the Hebrew word meaning gold, which is funny because that's usually what they did. They offered gold to the dragons. And this is an interesting depiction over here. This is when they take gold leaf sheets and they go to the Buddhist monasteries and whatever else, and they actually ply Buddha with gold leaf sheets. It's a gold leaf offering. It's very common. You'll find pictures of it all over the internet if you Google it, gold leaf offering to Buddha. And I can actually see some of them have these gold plates and all sorts of just kind of been chucked onto this offering of Buddha, which is so thick with gold, it's actually lumping up in certain points. You can, the original head's back there, and the whole gold part comes so far out. I mean, this must be tons and tons of gold, with a fortune. But, you know, you've got people coming there with these little gold leaf sheets that then come and do a gold offering to Buddha. It's, yeah, ritual tradition of the Buddhists and Hindus. All right, so let's talk about the gold thing. The gold. Why gold? Well, let's just say that as far back as humanity can be traced, they cannot be separated with the worship of serpent gods, the practice of slavery, the practice of ritual human sacrifice, and with the obsession of gold, okay? As portrayed in The Hobbit by Tolkien, I told you we'd be talking about Tolkien a lot tonight, as portrayed in the book and the film The Hobbit, Smaug, the dragon, had something called dragon sickness, or the dwarves that went into Smaug's cave got dragon sickness from the gold, which is like the lust for greed and power, okay? That's really what dragon sickness references. It references the love of gold, the love of wealth, greed and power. And it's interesting that it showed Smaug literally covered in gold, you know, just it's all his and nobody else's, and no one got not even a piece kind of thing. Very symbolic. It's interesting that it's called dragon sickness, is this obsession with gold. It's because all gods of all religions are ultimately just representations of the dragon. And it's interesting that we have to bring offerings. An offer is actually the Hebrew word for gold. Okay, we've got to give offerings, sacrificial offerings to the gods or dragons. And here's an example of this gold offerings being done here to a Buddhist, in the Buddhist religion. So it all ties into each other, as you can see, and it's all very intricately interwoven into the fabric of our reality. And if you guys have missed anything, please check out the archives, all available at ccn.media. We've done over 1,800 shows over the last 2 years. Everything we've done is there, so please, guys, do go check it all out. And if you have missed Dragonology Seasons 1 or 2, please go check them out too. What I'm telling you now might not make a lot of sense to you because of the fact that you haven't seen 1 and 2, and it makes a lot more sense if you're actually building on the knowledge you already have. If you want to get a quick buzz course in Dragonology, feel free to purchase a copy of my book, Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker. My book was released on the 1st of December last year, and yeah, it's got everything in it that you need to know in terms of breaking the spell of your enslavement. And for those people who happen to be watching this and want to get a €5 discount, please go to dragonology.info, click on download your copy of the book now for €25, and you can actually purchase it for $20 if you use the €5 discount code Dragonology S3. S3 stands for season 3. So Dragonology S3, and get your €5 discount from my book. And that's it for tonight, guys. Please do check out the broadcast guide to see what else is on. I'll be on tomorrow night with the Origin South Africa and much, much more. We've always got stuff going on here in CCN. And of course, we are an independently funded project, an independent, free and independent media network that is totally free of corporate sponsorship and authoritarian controls and regulations. So help us support our network, keep us on the air for 2017. Every penny helps. Do go to consciousconsumernetwork.tv to pick up on the various donation places, and of course to find out where the broadcast guide is, what is on, and to check out the live stream, which is available on the live broadcast icon right here. And as always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. We'll see you again next week. My name has been Melvie, and I'll be with you again. Good night.